With citizen science. Citizens play a vital role in shaping cities that they live in, particularly through participation in movements such as citizen science that can help them integrate more deeply into their communities and also help with genuine scientific research. Today we're going to have what's called a reverse session, which basically means that we're going to try and hear as much from you as possible. We've got five really inspiring speakers who are going to tell us about the work they're doing with citizen science, both in biodiversity and also from a policy perspective. And we're also going to hear from you, hopefully. So what I really want to do, and I know it's coming towards the end of the day, but I want it to be as interactive as possible. I'm going to just give you, the moderator, a speech now, which involves telling you, first of all, about the translating that's available in this room. You can ask questions in English, French, and German, but the interpretations are in English and French. If you haven't got a headset, you can find them in the cloakrooms. Please make sure that your phones are switched off. And do feel free to tweet. The hashtag is #EUGreenWeek. And we're going to be using the Connects Me app in this session because, as I said, I want to be as interactive as possible. And we're shortly going to be taking some votes on citizen science and find out how much you know about citizen science and understand about it. So does everyone have the app downloaded on their phone or iPad? Hands up if you haven't. Right, quite a few of you. I'm just wondering whether you've got time to do it. Well, let me do it. What I'm going to do is do this vote anyway because we've spent some time preparing it, but I might just get a show of hands as well so that we can gauge the whole opinion in the room. So the Connects Me app, for those of you who just want to be reminded, you go to the Connects Me app. I'll do it on my phone and then I'll remember what to do. You go to the Connects Me app. We're in session 5.3 and then you go to the interactive session in that. When you're in there, you will see the first vote, which is, the first question is, can citizen science influence EU policy? Let's see if this works. So those of you who are in there, yes, you've got the result already. 100% think of you, yes, citizen science can influence EU policy. I think you're a bit biased, this audience, anyway. Let's go for the next one, which is, in your opinion, at what level are citizen science contributions to governance most relevant? In your opinion, at what levels are citizen science contributions to government most relevant? Local authority, city, regional, national, and supranational. So local authority and city, both, oh, they're still going up. Neck and neck. Okay, so 75% think that local authorities and cities have the biggest contribution to make to citizen science. The third question, who should be responsible for supporting citizen science activities? Who should be responsible for supporting citizen science activities? Research funders, universities, government, citizens, civil society organizations, charitable foundations, or other? Who should be responsible? Well, this government is still in the lead, yes. So 86% think that government should, 88, oh, it's changing, interesting. Okay, so government's still in the lead, 78%. No, it's not, 70%. Okay, so government is in the lead still, 70%, 60% civil society and 40% universities, charitable foundations and research funders are 20%. And the final question, how likely are you to use citizen science in your work in the future? Very likely, likely, not very likely, not sure. Let's wait for the results to come in. Well, I think given that many of you voted 100% for the first question, the result is very likely. So we know where this audience is coming from. Thank you very much. And 18% I'm not sure. Let's see. We're going to take some of those questions at the end of this session and see if anything you've heard changes your view. Just regarding the ConnexMe app, we will be taking some questions on it. If you want to make comments or questions as we're going along, please do feed them in. And also, if you're not in this room and watching from elsewhere, it's a chance for you to do so. But we're also going to take questions in the old-fashioned way and raise your hands, especially for those of you who haven't got the app. So just to set the scene a bit, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Professor Johannes Virgle, who's chair of the European Citizen Science Association.
Yes, thank you very much and good afternoon. My name is Johannes Virgle. I work in Berlin. I run the Natural History Museum there, and I've been involved in citizen science, believe it or not, more than 40 years. I've started around 14 or 12, so whatever you want to gauge my age at. This app seems to be very interesting in giving interesting results and numbers, so looking forward to that. But what I also do is not just run the European Citizen Science Association, I also help the EU to find a new way to invigorate European science. And funnily enough, they, of all funders, have decided that it's going to be through openness, including openness towards society. And what that actually means is that we now have a huge organization with a global remit and at a global stage that's actually going to respond to the changes we are seeing all around us. So as you know, 2005, 2007, nobody really knows, but in that time, we as a species, as Homo sapiens, turned from a rural to an urban species. And by 2050, on all continents, up to 70–80% of all people will not just be over the age of 60, but also be in cities. And that will mean that we are looking at a huge change in our demography. Sorry, it's not 80% over 60, but 50% or so will be over 60. And 80% of us will be living in cities. So the thing where life will happen is in cities. It is now, it will be even stronger in the future. And cities need to be governed, and they need to be governed well, because we live only on this one planet and we have to manage it. And this can only be done if we find new ways how science and society can interact and take policy with it. I would argue that the way how it has been done thus far is successful to a certain degree, but it has led to a huge decline in resources, and it's not really facing up to the big challenges we are facing on this one Earth. There's just come out a book, a very interesting pamphlet from Bruno Latour. He's a French philosopher. He always thinks against the mainstream. I think it's really worthwhile you looking up how he's seeing it. He's basically saying we need a completely new approach. We need to look at the one Earth and deal with it. And exactly that is where I think citizen science can interact. So if the European Union, with its huge resources, putting it into research in the next framework, which will start from 2020, wants to increase research quality, boost collaboration, speeding up the research process, making the assessment of research more transparent, promoting public access to scientific research, as well as introducing more people to academic research, if that is what they want, and I think they are pretty much bent to do so, then citizens can play an even stronger role. And I don't know from which countries you're coming. Germany has just started to experiment a bit with government funding for citizen science, but in the EU, nobody ever stopped you as a citizen applying for research money. Whether you got it or not is a completely different issue, but you could always apply for it, which was, for example, not the case in Germany. So I think we are going to see a huge shift. It's going to be a shift for the better. It's going to bring its challenges and other things with it, but that can all be negotiated. And interestingly enough, in a few days, Monday, Tuesday next week actually, the EU science ministers will agree on new recommendations for open science. And just to give you a few ideas what is going to come down the road, because this is all stuff that we as citizen scientists can engage with. They are going to look at new rewards and incentives, new career and reward structures for researchers, which will, with the research indicators and next generation metrics, mean that it's not just publications and money that they're going to look at, but also how you engage with your peer community, but perhaps also with society. They will want to have a lot more training for people to engage with society in a different way. They're going to create a cloud that will be accessible to everybody so that you can use data that are being produced with public money and use it in the way and in the process how you want to use it, because what we all as citizens pay for, which is publicly funded research, we also may want to deal with. There will be fair data principles so that it will be open as possible, so that we can have access to it. The issue of research integrity needs to be looked up again, and they will encourage and support scientists to engage in citizen science. But citizen science is not just asking scientists to come up with clever ideas and puzzles they want to have solved, and then the citizens to engage. I think what we will hear today, and there is particularly where I'm coming from, the area of biodiversity of great importance, that there are people who have questions out there, and we as scientists need to help them to find ways to address these type of questions in relation to their ambitions and their needs. And very, very often we can learn from that. And I think science has to look at itself in a way that has to be different, because as you all know, our dear friend Richard Nixon announced that the battle of cancer starts in 1970. As far as I know, 50 years later, nothing much has been solved. Now, with the era of personalized data, personalized medicine, perhaps citizens' experience in especially health will show new ways of how science and society can interact, and it will, I think, strongly invigorate citizen science as a method, and I think that will be an interesting way forward. I would argue looking after the environment is a very, very old quest between science and society, but health, I think, will lead the way in how it can be done in a trusted and successful way. So, in a way, I think we are looking at some very, very interesting years ahead for citizen science, for engagement with science in different ways. Citizens have to learn, scientists have to learn. I think that's what science and life is all about. So I'm looking really forward to the next few years. And I'm also really looking forward to hearing about very exciting projects within EXA and outside of EXA. And I think there's plenty that we've heard here already, how people want to engage. And there's more to come. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for those opening thoughts about the role of citizen science and the fact that you want to engage more ordinary people in finding answers and also making science more open. We're now going to go to the really exciting part of our session, because unlike most Green Weeks where everything is held in the room, we're actually going to leave the room and go to see technology permitting, a real example of citizen science in action. Henrik Sell, who's chair of the Nature Group of European Science Centres and Museums, is going to give us a quick talk now, and he's going to cross over to a project, and he's going to tell us a bit more about it. Henrik.
Thank you very much. Do I have a remote for the changing? Okay. Yes. Please. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? Yes. Besides head of Nature, Excite Nature Group, I'm also Deputy Director of Natural History Museum in Aarhus. And how does this work here? There's a huge green button. We had a project about cities and biodiversity, and called Rethink Urban Habitat. That's part of Aarhus being a European capital of culture. We got some money for that project there. The purpose of the project and our interest as a natural history museum was to increase biodiversity in the city. And how do you do that? Our experience was that we engaged the public, involved politicians and officials, and make some physical actions together with the city. And why cities when you want to do something for biodiversity? That's because that's where we have our audience. When we make trips out in the nature, there'll be 30 gray-haired women, and nothing wrong with them. But I'm gray myself, but I mean, they're always saved. So we should have contact to other people. So one of our projects was communication about the nature in the city, open people's eyes to see what was around them. We have this light ball in the night, and that attracts butterflies, night butterflies. We have a house in an embassy, green embassy downtown Aarhus, where we showed what people could do. Looks very nice in the evenings, and you could get inside and get advices and ask questions if you want. We also, like many others, have an app where you could register what you see in the town, and it got into a map, so you can see where there would be big, high biodiversity in the town and low biodiversity in the town. And BioBlitzes to enlighten people and to do some research with the people from the museum and the citizens of what's going on in the city. Adapt a box. You could do something yourself. You could plant plants that are flowering for the pollinators and so on. We also make a huge exhibition, photo exhibition, competition where people could take pictures of where nature meet people and reverse. And there we had 100 wonderful pictures that were standing there for half a year downtown Aarhus with stories about the pictures and telling what you can do. It was a great success. Also physically action we did together with the technical department in the city. We have these green corridors into the city in the middle of the road where they planted wildflowers, and we made ponds and backyards. We'll get back to this, but you can see before and after. And we have the fire department to help us filling up the water for it. We make insect hotels in graveyards and rewilded fountains in the middle of the city. We also have to try to make some publicity about the project together with the art museum. There was a big art museum called The Garden, and these German guys or girls were making a big piece of art in one of our big parks. Looks like this from the top, and it made a tremendous amount of debate because they claimed that we were spoiling the nature. And I mean, it was a nice lawn with grass about that high. So in our opinion, we didn't spoil anything. Reverse, we had a lot of discussion about what is nature in the city. So that's our project in very short, and now we will try to connect direct to Aarhus, where they have a very sunny day, more sun than we have this morning anyway, and we'll go to the pond in a backyard, very downtown Aarhus. It is the oldest town in Aarhus, goes all the way back to the Viking Age, and it's exciting to see. We have rehearsed this so many times. Okay. Should we try one more? That's strange. He's not at home. That's strange. Well, what can we do? Yeah, we can go to the next presentation and see what we can do. There's nothing to do. Well, that's how techniques sometimes are.
Well, hopefully we can go to it shortly. Yeah. But in the meantime, Henrik, if you sit down, I'm going to invite Savita Wilmot, who's the from the European BioBlitz Network and City Nature Challenge. And she's going to talk again about biodiversity and bioblitzing.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming along. I'm going to go straight on from what Hendrik was saying, actually, because he really quickly mentioned BioBlitz. And you might not know what a BioBlitz is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about BioBlitz because it's a great case study of a certain type of citizen science. So if I can ask you to put your imagination hat on and imagine a green space, a lovely green space. Maybe it's a nature reserve, maybe it's a Natura 2000 site. And what you'd like to do, maybe you're a policymaker or a conservation manager, is to really understand the biodiversity of this site, really get some fantastic data to help you make some decisions about this site. So you need to assemble a team. Okay, you're going to choose who you might want to be on your team to help you pull this data together. So will you bring some 5-year-olds who are particularly enthusiastic about insects and bugs that they might find? Will you bring some local people who maybe don't have great eyesight or mobility and can only come out for part of the day but really know a lot about the site that you're visiting? Will you bring some scientists and some experts who've been looking at different kinds of species and some really in-depth knowledge? How about also some local residents, some people who use that site quite regularly? So BioBlitz's attempt to do all of this and bring this kind of a team together into one green space to help create a data map. They're now done all over the world, and they're traditionally run in a competitive structure. So offering people 24 hours to find as many species that can be found in one single green space. And as you can imagine, 24 hours in the life of a green space sees a whole range of different kinds of species. As an event, those of you who run events, that's a complicated thing to do. And as event organizers, we often spend as much time on health and safety, getting people out in the middle of the night as we do processing the data after. But when you have a team like this, if this is your scientific team, you're going to get both comments and questions. Sometimes we get questions about how fantastic it is that we're engaging with such a wide group, but we also get questions about the quality of data that a team like this can pull together. And that's what I think is particularly interesting about BioBlitz formats, is that tension between engagement and data collection. So BioBlitz is an open format. It doesn't belong to any organization in the world. This is a logo that we made publicly available and is now used by so many organizations in the UK and often wider. And I think that's part of the success of BioBlitz, is that no one organization in Europe or elsewhere has tried to be in charge of it, but it's something that's done very widely. in the UK, we chair the UK BioBlitz network, and we've been very, very open and generous in creating resources and helping different cities and sites understand especially that data question. Because although I can't tell another city in the UK how best to engage their residents, although I can share some ideas from Bristol, we need to make sure that our data ends up in the same place. Recently, it's been particularly interesting to work as part of the DTOS project, a Horizon 2020 project, to also co-chair the European network. And I'll show a slide in a little bit about who's involved in that network. So we'll ask if your city is shown. In terms of formats, we were working on a new format this summer, kind of an inside-out BioBlitz. Instead of looking at one site, we asked our residents of Bristol and our nearby town of Bath to look at all the sites. That included their gardens, that included different streets. And this is something that we put out. And you can see that competitive element coming out again. But really, these are just about formats and types that we are trying to create. But this shows all of the different organizations who are part of this conversation. So some of these cities are running these types of events. Some of these cities are just finding out more about how these different kind of formats could work in their city as part of the DTOS project. But I'd encourage you to find out more as either part of the discussion or a little bit later. One of the things that we always tell cities is that BioBlitz isn't always the right citizen science format for what you're trying to find out or who you're trying to engage. But when it is, it can be a really powerful tool to engage people to find out more about the green spaces around them. Thank you very much.
Savita, thank you. If you'd like to take a seat, we will take some questions, but I think, are we going to have one more go to connect?
I think we are ready.
Do you want to come here?
So, should I try to connect? Okay, now I can recognize somebody. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, greetings to Blockers. We are here in sunny Aarhus.
Great.
Just give you a flip around. Clear blue sky, and quite appropriately, we're here at the sunny backyard of Stine Fleming, one of our citizens that's involved in a project about water holes about ponds here in Aarhus. Our project, Wild Aarhus, aimed to establish 10 different ponds throughout the inner city of Aarhus in both public and private domains, so that to encourage people to look for biodiversity and to do something for biodiversity. And the pond that we're at, I'll just flip you so you can look at it. This is the pond that we're at right now here in the sunny backyard. Is also a climate project. It's also a way to adapt to the changing climate and to hold up some of the rainwater that's falling in increasing amounts here in Aarhus. So it has both a function of aesthetics and biodiversity, but also has a very clear function towards climate adaptation.
How did you manage to involve the city, the people living there in the background? Maybe Stine could ask on that.
Oh, sure. Well, basically, we heard that there was a project from the museum that was doing this, and we knew we had a dark and gloomy back courtyard where there was an old sandbox, and so we said, well, maybe you could use ours. And so they came down and looked at it and came with some suggestions, and then we had some meetings with the people who live here, and there was a lot of fighting about it, and eventually we all agreed to go into this project because there were people that were both interested in the aesthetics and the plants and the animals that could come, and also, of course, the thing about the water, because water is a big problem in Aarhus. Well, not a big problem yet, but it will be. Trying to get ahead of that. So eventually, because it's so all over the place, it has so many functions. We finally agreed on saying yes to the project.
Yes, and what is the best part of the project, do you think?
Well, for me, no doubt, the best part of it is that there's water and plants and animals in my courtyard.
Oh, okay.
For a lot of my neighbors, the best part about it is that it looks much nicer than the things that were there before, that the children have somewhere to play and explore, and that the water is, it has a purpose, a real purpose in retaining the water from the drains when there's a lot of rain.
Should we hear if there's any questions from the audience to this project or whatever?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. 10 seconds. Yes?
Thank you very much. Karin Dubsky from Coast Watch from Ireland. I wonder how many ponds were in Aarhus in, say, 1950? Because around our village we had 68 ponds and we now have 8.
I think it's almost the same picture in Aarhus. Many of the small water holes and many of the small ponds that were around Aarhus simply disappeared as the city expanded.
As well as the river.
And as well as the river, as well as Aarhus River, which was totally built over, but has now been opened. There seems to be a lot of understanding towards bringing back nature, bringing back especially water, because water has a calming effect. To look at water, it's almost like looking at a bonfire in the evening. You can just be mesmerized by the water and by the life within it. So there's an increasing call for more ponds, more water holes, more open surface water in all of Aarhus. And possibly the climate adaptation plans is one of the ways which we can bring this back, maybe not all year round, but during increased rainy periods, then we can actually accommodate a large amount of water for viewing, for nature, for experiencing water life in Aarhus, and probably all around Europe as well.
Okay, I think we will finish here. Thank you very much, both of you, for spending an afternoon in the sun. I hope you survived. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Would anyone like to ask any more questions about BioBlitz, and also to Henrik? Any questions? Lady at the front here.
Yeah, actually, it's a question related to the pond, but possibly you know the answer. It's about the maintenance and the property. I mean, the propriety, clean. Is that pond being taken care of by the people? What is the maintenance? What are the maintenance costs and the degree of cleanness?
Yeah, we gave some money during the Culture City project to establish the pond, but they take care of it from now on. And that's their responsibility. They can ask for advices, and we come down and look at it, but they take care of it themselves.
Any more questions, anyone? I just wanted to know how much you think citizen science will actually increase the number, the more people that are engaged will suddenly help increase the number of ponds in somewhere like there.
That's a difficult question to try, but I'm thinking because it's very visible, and everybody would like and love a pond. Most people would love a pond in their backyard. So I'm pretty sure that will rise in the year ahead. But of course, I don't know how many, but we will encourage it anyway.
Absolutely. And Savita, I was really interested by the comment you made about the sort of conflict between data and ordinary citizens collecting data. And I guess the question everyone wants to ask is, while citizen science sounds like a very nice word, but actually, I mean, what do ordinary citizens know about science, and how scientific are their actions?
So this is a conversation under great discussion, I think, in the citizen science world. I'm sure my colleagues would have a view. My own feeling is that the best projects that I've seen really maintain that tension and are always looking at both the outcomes for people and the outcomes for biodiversity. And a certain day or project or theme or research project might take a slight emphasis on one, and that can be okay as long as all of the project partners are really upfront about what is being evaluated and what is being collected and the kind of quality of the data. So I'm a real fan of maintaining that creative tension between the two.
Thank you. Any more questions? Henrik, I just wanted to make the point about the diversity, because while you're trying to promote biodiversity, the diversity of your citizen science is not huge, is it?
Say that it's not what?
Well, it's not. There isn't a huge range. It's a certain type of person, either a school child or a lady of a certain age.
No, we have a big. The idea is that when you are in the city, it's very easy to bring your kids because it's half an hour and you can go back or go home or in your flat or whatever. If the kids get tired or whatever, so it's much easier to get a much higher diversity when it comes to your audience, definitely. And you grab people because if there's people standing in the street, people stop up and see what's going on here. And that means you get people that are not invited or not interested in advance.
Okay, I know Professor Virgle wants to come in.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So on this picture here, you see the nice young man cycling. So there are plenty of projects around citizen science now in urban environmental monitoring. So all you have to do is just put your smartphone in front of your bike and measure the air quality on your way, and then you get... so the beauty about citizen science in cities is that you can, with fantastic creativity, which we see here, engage actually any audience, because they all have certain questions in relation to their habitat, where they live, and they want to live well in that habitat. They want to understand what is going on, be it heat, be it dirt, be it pond life. And these machines, they do not just tell Facebook what you're doing. They can also do actually some good things, and I think there are plenty. They're used increasingly to do so. So your creativity should show no boundaries. Just get on and do something and engage with these super projects.
Just
and
before
teams here.
moving on to the next two speakers, how can ordinary people get involved? How do they know that they can get involved in this kind of thing?
That's a good question. I think it really depends. I was quite struck again by this DITOS map we've seen. So EXA is involved in all of this, and you can see that the old Iron Curtain, so to speak, still runs through Europe. So I think in sort of the former Western part of Europe, engagement, having a political voice, trying to engage with local, regional, national issues is still much more common. But I think if we want to build a sustainable future, locally or globally, I think we need to double our efforts to get a bit more east and also perhaps deeper into communities. So we've just started an interesting project looking at nightingales. Berlin is a city of nightingales. About 3,000 nightingales are currently singing in Berlin, and they have a fantastic migratory background because they come from Africa, where they are for most of their time. So one of the things we try to do now is use organisms like nightingales to try to get into migrant communities and try to talk to them about their new home. Whether it's going to work or not, I can tell you in 18 months' time, but at least one can find hooks to try to get into completely new audiences. It costs a lot of time and a lot of money, and that is again why it is important that at least the EU is recognizing that some of these vast amounts of money that go into research might need to be redirected towards these type of efforts. There will be no other way. Yes, charitable foundations, but that's not that big in Europe. It has to be one way or the other, at least in Europe. Government money, in the US, it is already charitable money. So plenty to play for here.
Thank you very much. Let's bring in the next two speakers who are going to be talking about policy. And let's first of all ask Inyan Murthy, who's from the Land Sense and We Observe projects, to come and make his presentation. Have you got the clicker? Yeah.
Thank you, Anya. This thing's on. Great. First of all, thank you to the organizers and EXA especially for giving us the opportunity to chat a little bit about two projects, Land Sense and We Observe. These are two Horizon 2020 projects which have started not so long ago, especially We Observe, and I'll try to touch on both of them with a bit more of an emphasis on Land Sense simply because it's more mature than the other one. My name is Inyan Murthy. I come from that organization, also known as IASA. I won't actually talk about all of that names that go into that organization. It'll actually take up more time than I'm allotted. So a little bit about the motivation and where we fit in this niche of citizen science. So we come at this at a slightly different angle in the sense that we would like to uncover the collective potential of not only citizen science, but also Earth observation data. So we're looking at this intersection, this niche where we would like to improve the way we see, map, and understand the world. So satellite data or other sorts of Earth observation data is becoming more readily available, it's more accessible, and a lot of times it's becoming simply free for any citizen out there. So if we can demonstrate the value of satellite data to citizens and demonstrate the value of citizen-generated data complementing satellite data, we can really thrive in this intersection. So at this intersection, we have this opportunity to engage people in ground-based observations, so very similar to what we just saw with these BioBlitzes. But we have several different themes that we're trying to do, and also focusing along the lines of what Johannes just mentioned, which is using mobile applications. So Land Sense itself is a rather large project with 18 partners coming across 9 countries. And it started back in September 2016, and it runs for 4 years. So this project has quite a diverse range of actors in terms of the sectors that they come from. We have, I think, 6 or 7 SMEs within this consortium as well, but a lot of academic partners. And within the Land Sense project, what we're tackling is bringing together what we're calling an engagement platform in which focuses on the theme of land use and land cover monitoring, which is where our team really wants to emphasize the citizen science element of it. And when looking at land use and land cover changes, we want to look at that in both urban landscapes, we want to look at it in agricultural landscapes, and we want to target forest and habitat monitoring landscapes as well. So within the Land Sense project, we actually have 7 different demonstration pilots which are being implemented in a testing phase this particular summer, and what will end up happening is rolled out to the public in 2019. So what I'll now do is take an opportunity to give you a slight kind of example of one of these particular pilots that are going on in the Land Sense campaign, which is, I guess, somewhat close to my heart, let's say, because it's taking place in Vienna itself, which is where we are based. So this particular demonstration pilot is focused on green space monitoring, and not just green space monitoring, but green space monitoring within urban environments. So Vienna, as many of you have been or may have not been, you will know or you will discover that it's already a very green city. But in working with the local administration, the city of Vienna directly, they have implemented their STEP 2025 policy plan, where they want to have a target of ensuring that anyone living in Vienna can reach a green space by simply walking 250 meters. So this is the target that they would like to reach. So this is how our group is helping them out, by creating a mobile application that we can target to the citizens of Vienna, in which, let's say, locations are distributed all across the city. And what we want to do is actually direct citizens to these locations and get information from these locations. We get information in the form of photographs, which are valuable for land cover and land use assessments. But what's more valuable is the landscape perception information that we get from these citizens. This subjective data that is often very hard for the local administration to acquire. How do you feel about being in this green space? How is this green space being used currently as you are right now? Did you travel very far to get to this green space? Do you feel safe in this green space? Is it very noisy there? So this is the type of information that will very much help the city administration and the planners, the urban development department, help plan how Vienna will look by 2025. Quickly switching hats now to a different project, which we are also coordinating, which is the We Observe project, which started very, very recently, in where we are more focused on creating events of getting the citizen science communities together. It's what the Horizon 2020 program calls a coordination and support action, so where we will be hosting a series of different events that brings together the ecosystem of citizen science practitioners to kind of coalesce the knowledge base that currently exists within citizen science. So as you have seen, there's a lot of activities going on right now, but the collective knowledge of the groups is still somewhat fractured. So we hope to target a little bit of this in the We Observe project. And to target this, we've identified 3 pillars, which are actually obstacles or challenges for citizen science, which is awareness. So how do we even find out about citizen science initiatives? Acceptability, how do we actually get this information and knowledge into the hands of the decision and policymakers? And sustainability, how can this ecosystem and support the policymaking as well as scale up to other citizen science activities across various sectors. So these are themes that you see mentioned not only in this session, but the one prior as well that touched on citizen science. So as part of starting to build these different communities of practice, we have our first call for participants. It was already announced and it's coming together in Geneva on June 6th, where we will be hosting an event where all and anyone who is interested in citizen science can come and join our communities of practice. So if you are planning to attend this EXA conference, which some of you in the crowd I'm sure are, so please find out about We Observe. You can just visit our website and join one of these communities of practice with an event taking place on June 6th. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to field questions later.
Thank you, Inian. I'll ask you to sit down here in a minute, but let's hear now from DG Environment and Elena Montani, who's going to talk about the contribution of volunteers to citizen science.
Hello. Slides are not there yet. Can anybody help? Yeah, we did send this slide.
While we're just trying to sort out the slides, let me just take any questions for Inian. Would you like to come and have a seat? Anyone in the audience with any questions? Yes.
I just wanted to ask concerning the methodology you conducted in Vienna, because if I understood Professor Virgle right, there has to be an intrinsic reason why people go out and they have their own questions, he said. So, but if you just let people go around and they work as scouts of your research project, is there such an intrinsic reason? So where do you catch them that they really work for you, or that you get a valuable result in the end?
So our approach involves making sure that we're already tapping into networks that exist. So for example, at the very base level, this is now a new data collection tool for the city workers themselves that didn't exist. So that's one very simple level. At another level, we will tap into networks that exist, such as Friends of So-and-so Park, Friends of this and that park. And so that's another level of engagement that we will pursue to ensure that people who are somewhat intrinsically interested in preserving park space or green space within their area or not would be engaged within that region. So it's very much now a project that is looking at establishing its kind of basis on the network that exists before trying to roll it out to the public themselves. So, and in that process, we hope to be able to define maybe new questions that would come up in which we can modify the app accordingly to say that if you're in this particular area, we could ask you a different question than what we might ask in another area. So.
All right, I think we are ready now, so Elena.
Okay, hello. So I'm Elena Montani. I come from the European Commission, from the Directorate General for Environment. And this will be maybe the most boring part of the session, because what is happening here? I think you don't like my slides today. Okay, can you maybe put the presentation up? Okay, I will just start in the meantime. So I come from a unit which is called Environmental Knowledge, Eco-Innovation and SMEs. And I'm in charge of the environmental knowledge. And we have, I will just maybe start from the second slide. So we have tried to identify a bit of innovative ways to support EU policies with environmental knowledge. And in 2015, we have created something which is called the Environmental Knowledge Community, which is a group of EU services who work with environmental knowledge, like Eurostat or the European environmental agencies, or the Research Director General of the Commission, and DG Environment and DG Climate, and also the Joint Research Center of the Commission. And here we are trying to identify what we can do to improve the way that EU policies are based on knowledge. So by knowledge, we don't mean only the traditional scientific knowledge, but we want to explore also what other interesting new sources of knowledge can help to support policies. So we have created a specific project on citizen science, trying to understand what citizen science can bring to EU policies and what EU policies can bring to the citizen science, because it should be a mutual direction, not only just one way to go. We have, how do I go back like this? Okay, this is the way we understand citizen science. It is based on a Harkless classification, so we don't see citizen science only as pure data, and we don't see it only as extreme engagement. We see it in a gradual scale, coming from crowdsourcing as a first level of citizen science engagement, where citizens are mainly sensors. We can call it volunteer computing. Citizens can engage a bit more as a distributed intelligence, and in this sense, citizens can become interpreters of the data they collect. We have a level 3, which is more participatory science, where the participation of citizens is also in problem definition and in data collection. And then the 4th level, where citizens are actually collaborating in not only the problem definition and collection, but also in the analysis of the data and knowledge that they collect. As I said, citizen science is not new as a phenomenon, and it was already recognized by the European Commission, but now we are really trying to structure the way it is integrated into policies. We have identified 6 phases where citizens can contribute to policies. You can see, so the first is data gathering, the second is data validation and quality control, then we have data analysis. These first 3 phases are more classic, and they are kind of present in classical citizen science project. And while the other 3 phases, which are connecting with established policy-making processes, informing about policy-related actions, and monitoring policy impacts, are not normally the first driver around citizen science project. But this is exactly what we are most interested in. We want to see how citizen science can be more connected to the policies, and especially at the EU policies. We saw the first one of the first questions at the beginning was, at what level you think citizen science can contribute to the political governance? And we clearly saw that the supranational level, which would be the European level, was the one where people felt it could contribute less. So we actually think we can contribute more, but we have to set up some frameworks in order to channel all the potential of citizen science. And this we can structure around three levels. One, citizen science can contribute to thematic policies. We are especially exploring for environmental policies, but it's absolutely not limited to these. It could be used for home affairs, for example, for security threats, or also for energy purposes. There are very different educational purposes. I mean, there are many policies, EU policies, where citizen science can contribute. Open science was already mentioned by Professor Virgle. So it's the way that citizens can interact with the science, with the research, and how research can open up to citizens. And this is something that the European Commission is pushing quite a lot in the past years, and also for future research agendas. And then for better regulation, citizens can increase, I mean, citizens' interaction with policies can definitely increase the transparency of EU policies, and can also increase the way, strengthen the way that EU policies are legitimated by the citizens. This is some of the outcomes of our little project, let's call it this way. It's not a project in classical terms because it's by commission services, but we are trying to structure in a way that we actually achieve outcomes. And there were also some concrete applications, especially 2 apps that were developed by the Joint Research Center, one on invasive alien species and one on Natura 2000, so the protected areas. Some of you may know them. They were also tested in communities of practice, like in the Danube River, for example. And then from those experiences, we decided to have some hand-on experiences in order to really learn what it means to be with the hands in some projects. But of course, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. The idea is actually to try to learn lessons from all the existing citizen science projects and all the communities that are already so much active in Europe and also beyond. And in the past, more or less, year, this was increasingly recognized in policy documents, for example, in the Action Plan on Nature, People and Economy, where citizen science is specifically mentioned in one action, on the actions to streamline environmental reporting, where the idea is that the classical reporting of environmental obligations, which is based in environmental legislation, is not done anymore in the classical paperwork of flows of data from the member states through the statistical offices and then getting a stamp and then sending everything to Brussels, but that we increasingly go towards a different system where we use the data collected at source. And we can use, in this way, we can definitely access also different kinds of data, especially for our interest is citizen science data. The same for compliance assurance. There was an action plan that was adopted by the Commission only a few months ago, I think in February. And the idea, one of the action is exactly on how citizens can contribute to improve compliance assurance of EU environmental legislation. And there are already nice, interesting examples of this. And what we want to explore is how we're going to structure this further. There will be an action plan on pollinators, and I can already tell you that citizen science will play a part. And then, again, the open science agenda, which was already mentioned. So now the next steps for us are to structure all this work and try to come up with some kind of recommendations and guidelines of how citizen science can contribute to the EU policy making in general, especially environmental policy making. We are working on an inventory of citizen science relevant for EU policies. So some of you may have already been contacted. We are trying to have a kind of, not complete, but an overview of the most relevant best practices in this term. And then we will analyze these best practices so that we can try to learn lessons and come up with the kind of horizontal recommendations, in particular for environmental reporting and compliance assurance. So thank you very much, and don't hesitate to ask questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Please take a seat, Elena. And Inian, any questions at all from the audience or on the app? I can't see any yet. I was just interested in something that Inian had said about awareness, acceptability, and sustainability. Elena and Inian, I want to ask both of you, what do you think the main challenges are in kind of promoting that awareness, making it acceptable, making the results acceptable, and making it sustainable?
For us, the main challenge is to have sustainability in terms of policy outcomes. So we need, of course, for us, the most important is the projects don't finish after 1 year, but they are a continuation to see a trend where we can draw on data which regularly feeds policies, because of course it's most difficult to feed in something which is only done once. But of course, in policy terms, there are different interests. I mean, one is data collection, but the other one is also the behavioral component and then the awareness among citizens. This is something that can support policy as such. For example, a difference in behavior, for example, on plastic, for example, it can greatly help to achieve policy results. In other cases, we need data which is solid enough to be used in monitoring and reporting, and in other situations we need maybe some involvement of citizens in science, so that we can also show that that research in the European Union is becoming more open to also to citizens' engagement.
Yeah, and thanks for the question, Anya. And I'll try to tackle the acceptability component of that question, which is to give you a concrete example. So within LandSense, we have a strong focus on quality assurance and quality control. So this taps into what you were mentioning in terms of data quality and whether it's not actually going to be accepted by the community, not just the scientific community, but of course the decision-making community as well. So the concrete example that I can give you is that the European Commission spends a lot of money on their Lucas surveys. This is a land use frame survey where they send out professional surveyors to some 270,000 locations across Europe every 3 years, and at these locations, professional surveyors are recording photographs and what's happening, what kind of land use is being used there, what kind of land cover is being used there. So our approach, it might be a flawed approach, but was to actually take these same points themselves and throw them into a citizen science application and to see what kind of a job citizens could do. So we have tested this out a little bit within Austria itself, and the protocol that the citizens follow is not so dissimilar from what the professional surveyors follow. But the difference being is that we can provide them near real-time quality assurance. So when a citizen goes out to one of these locations, acquires this data, and sends this data to us, we tell them within 24 hours whether we believe that the data that you provided has met the quality standards, and we can directly compare it with what the surveyor did. And so to be able to get back to the citizens saying, you did a great job, you did as great of a job as a professional surveyor would, or you did a great job, but you could improve here, here, and here. And so we provide these notifications, this kind of quality assurance feedback to them as quickly as possible. And what we're finding out is that citizens or these volunteers are improving over time. So, and this is the this is how we can try to ensure that citizen science data, or as one approach anyway, meets the quality standards of the European Commission even. So I'm not going to say that citizens are going to replace these professional surveyors. That could get me into a lot of trouble. But the data set that they provide can complement this professional surveyor data quite a fair bit. So.
Do put your hand up if you want to ask a question. Yes, there's a lady there.
Thank you very much. Karin Dubsky of Coastwatch. We are one of the longest standing marine or coastal projects, and we did get financial help from the European Commission. We started in Ireland in 1987, and just to give it a plug, we have an exhibition of 30 years of data in the European Parliament yesterday and today and tomorrow. So if anybody would like to come, and tomorrow morning from 10:30 till 11, we're just focusing on the plastic strategy and the policy tomorrow. I think the most important point which was made by the Commission now was on that it should be meaningful and that it should relate to policy. We are finding the reason why, without finance, we are working now for many years as volunteers. The reason why the project continues is because people can see that when they contribute, they can make a difference. For the Water Framework Directive, for example, in a local thing, my colleague is here who is the international coordinator on the technical side. In the past, when people said there's a stream here, and officially there wasn't, then the assumption was that there wasn't. Now that we are mapping the streams, we are finding there is a stream here, but it has been accidentally omitted from the Water Framework Directive maps. A citizen who finds such a stream starts naming it after themselves and is terribly proud and will continue doing citizen science, assuming the officials will accept what they have said. So that interface of what a citizen finds and how officials react is terribly important. Our EPA in Ireland was exceptionally good and proactive last year, thanking the citizens and saying they will update their maps. But you don't find that all the time. So it's really, the question is, how can we have a better response from officials to what citizens find? Thank you.
Savita, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, if I could maybe just tie a thought into that, and also your point about the surveying. And maybe this is a particular kind of UK context. It's a bit of a caution, I think, from our side. We're really careful what we communicate with our residents and our citizens about the data that they find, and that how it relates to decisions, for example, around planning. Because we can get into some very difficult areas that we don't want to touch about how that data might be used to make decisions in one way or another. And we're also very careful not to give an impression that volunteers are doing the work of paid officials. In fact, we really try to give a message that as residents, you're doing work we cannot do. I think it's about 1/6 of my city is people's gardens. We can't come into your gardens. We need your help. There's more of you than there are of us. So we're really careful about some of those messages. But I think Coastwatch has been a great example, actually, of communicating with citizens that I've seen.
Do officials take citizen science seriously enough?
I do. This is what we're trying to promote. No, I do, and I definitely understand the issue of feedback. This has been is always a problem, especially in the EU, because of course the distance from citizens is larger, and then giving feedback is more difficult. But now, I think technology helps to be able to give feedback also when the distance, the geographical distance is there. For sure, our idea is to so integrate citizen science into policies means that it's also recognized as not only a source but a contribution to either the setting the problem definition of the policies, but also to contribute to monitoring the policy impact, the state of the environment. So we are learning. We are trying to also understand from this kind of feedback loops And I think, for example, the compliance assurance action plan is also a very, very nice process to understand how citizens can legally or not legally bring an issue forward to authorities. It can be at different levels, but within a European framework. So one of the results of that process will be that member states will have some clear guidance on how they should try to use further citizens' handlings and citizens' opinions about the state of the environment.
Thank you. I think Frank Logberg from Aachen University wants to come in.
Yes, we have a brand new data protection regulation thanks to the European Commission. So is this challenging these civil science approaches? I mean, you have to ask everybody to allow you to work with your data.
I think that's affecting absolutely everyone in this room, actually. Any more questions? Yes, there's two questions. I'll take them both so that lady first and then the gentleman.
I'm Josefina Enfedake from DG Research and Innovation. So we are at the other side of the science policy cycle. As you know, we are ending the current framework program for research and innovation. I'm glad to see that many of these projects are funded by Horizon 2020. But now we are preparing the next one. And in the next one, particularly biodiversity is going to take back the position that shouldn't have lost because we were too busy trying to do innovation and more applied nature-based solutions that are also very, very good. And I wonder, when I see your classification of the different types of citizen science, if we couldn't do one of the highest levels of really involving the citizens in the making of the next framework program. And I'm trying to do here a reverse lobby, so I'm trying to lobby you guys, your institutions and the citizens you can mobilize to lobby for a mission, the biodiversity. For example, it's a hashtag Mission Biodiversity, and to participate in the consultations that will come up to try to include, not only to have biodiversity back in the picture, to have more monitoring, which is nowadays is absent from the research programs, and to have more citizens and stakeholder engagement. How do you see that, and how can we do it?
Okay, we'll just take the next question.
Alex Minchell from Bristol City Council in the UK. So I'm a huge advocate of citizen science and citizen data. But in science, there is a set of sort of codes and ethics about, for example, not giving people data that's knowingly wrong, or it may worry them unduly or give them false comfort. How do you, particularly say in air pollution standards, how do we help ensure that scientific standards and ethics are applied to citizen data management and collection?
Okay, Professor Virgle.
So I've worked as a professional scientist, I don't know for how long. I think the interesting thing is that you read quite a bit and ever more about unsure data and fraud in science. So the Lancet lately said that about 80% of medical research is basically rubbish for the bin. So I haven't heard that about citizen science yet. So I think we have a bit to catch up there. In general, I think there are codes of practice, and communities can adhere to it or they cannot adhere to it. And I think that applies to everybody who engages in science. So therefore, I think we have to build communities of practice, work together, share our concerns, our excitement, and something will come out of it. It will be a process. But I really reject the notion that science can stand there and say, we have a certain ethics and practice and we apply it rigorously to ourselves. If they could do that, they might have a better standing, I would argue, challenging other groups of engaging. So I think the ball is first and foremost for me in the established science quota, they have to clean their act up. Apparently, most so in medicine.
Thank you. And who would like to answer the question about how to allow citizens to engage more and be more than data collection, particularly in the mission diversity consultation coming up?
I have a thought about that, because I think it's very, very important to have the communication with the citizens when they are involved in a project. And you know, sometimes these projects are projects, and that means after 2 years, 3 years, it run out, and then we leave the citizens with what then? What happens afterwards? And as an institution, I think it's very important to have the reliability that we still keep the contact, and we provide you with information along the way while we're using these data in different settings or whatever. So, and you know, people, my employers also lose their interest for that project and goes on to another project, and that means the communication to these people here are lacking. So that's actually a job for leaders also, to be sure that this goes on forever. Not forever, but in a proper way.
Right, in a bit of citizen science here, we're just going to do some of those questions again and just see if any of you have moved your position at all. So I'm just alerting the technical people at the back, if you're ready to run the vote. Can citizen science influence EU policy? Let's see if it comes up. Yes, no, a little. Well, that is interesting. It has changed. Yes. It's not very scientific. The data is a bit suspect, but yes, well, yeah, assuming that the same number of people voted, that has changed. So it's now 60% saying yes, it can, and 40% before saying a little, and before it was 100%. So I don't know what we've done. I'm sorry, this has had the wrong effect, this conversation. Okay, in your opinion, at what levels are citizen science contributions to governance most relevant? What levels are local authority, city, regional, national, or supranational? What levels are citizen science contributions to governance most relevant? Well, there is a change again, because before we had local authority and city the same, and now it looks like local authority is the winner. City and regional, oh no, it's moving, but they're still the same. And supranational, which didn't really feature before, is going up. And national. So yes, everyone's changed. There's probably only 2 people voting now, but anyway, there we go. I hope you're all voting. You've got to all vote if you voted last time. Just so this is so that the science is correct in this case. So who should be responsible for supporting citizen science activities? Who should be responsible for supporting citizen science activities? Should they be research funders, universities, government, citizens, civil society organisations, charitable foundations, or other? Well, that is also interesting. Is that going to change? Oh, okay. Well, more people voted for civil society this time, which didn't really feature last time. Government still has a major role to play, and charitable foundations has a bigger role to play this time as well. Yes, that is interesting. Civil society is coming second. And the final vote, how likely are you to use citizen science in your work in the future? How likely are you to use it? Very likely? Likely? Not very likely? I'm not sure. Well, that is also a change. Oh, no, hang on, not very likely is going up. No, okay. Likely is in the lead. Lovely. Well, Professor Virgle, would you like to just, we've got about 3 minutes left. I'd like to know your observations, if you'd like to just give us some closing remarks.
So, as we only have very, very short period of time, first of all, I think we all should give a big hand of applause to Gaia and Carol for organizing all of this here today. And of course, to the panelists and to you, Anja, for chairing all of this. So I think the last 60 seconds, the things that I think we can take away here is we've seen fantastic examples of local action, how to really get the spirit of enthusiasm into all generations, for example, to BioBlitz, which is a different form of local action. But that with new technologies, we now have the opportunity to look at the big picture. Galileo, you see some exhibits here around that. It's the only big infrastructure the EU are going to own. They're going to put billions and billions of funding in it. Think quickly how you can follow the example of We Observe. There is plenty of citizen science and scope in there. Of course, we've learned that the EU, and I really recommend looking at that also in comparison perhaps with your own national governments, how the EU is really striving to get policies based on knowledge into action, and it wants to tap into that knowledge, be it in scientific institutions or in society. And I think we really need to applaud that, and we need to help and work with that. Whether politicians will listen to proper scientific knowledge out of institutions or to citizens is a completely different question. I think they can ignore both sides if they wish to, and perhaps that's even the role of policy, but then we all have a vote, so we can do something about that. So I think it makes, in a way, a really round thing from local action, enthusiasm, engagement, to the big picture, and citizen science is a fantastic connector between science, policy and society, and I hope that next time we have this, 100% are already using it and not just very likely to do so in the future. So thank you very much for being here this afternoon.
Thank you very much, and thank you once more to all our speakers for their contributions, and also for you, the audience, for coming. And I'd also like to thank DG Environment for hosting this, and also the interpreters. Thank you very much. Goodbye.